If you made it this far into the video and you are a tropical astrologer or a classical astrologer, and possibly even a practitioner of Jyotish, you are probably furious. Full disclosure, I am exhausted today. I've been taking Latin dance lessons and I'm about 10 hours in. I have learned nothing. So I got really frustrated yesterday. We were out all day, walked a lot, walked for probably, I don't know, a few hours. And when I got home, I decided to take matters into my own hands. And I taught myself how to samba. Thank you, YouTube. I'm actually really good at it now. I thought I was terrible. I thought there was something wrong with me. I felt like a robot. I suspect my dance teacher, she's kind of young, so we could possibly be her first dance class ever. I'm not 100% sure. Regardless, so feel pretty confident about my samba skills. Not so confident I'm going to make any sense today as I'm talking to you. And that's maybe unfortunate because I do want to share some very interesting things and pertinent things about not just sidereal astrology, but the ancient astrology that I do and why it's so different, and why when people get done getting a reading from me, they can't believe how accurate it was and how much it resonated with them. But before I do any of that, to all 200 people who are actually going to watch this video, I absolutely want to hear what you think about this. So please leave me a comment, even if you think this is the dumbest thing you've ever heard, or you have any questions or anything at all. Leave me a comment. I respond to everything, including really angry, aggressive stuff. I have no problems with that, so feel free to do that as well. You may be wondering, what is the difference between tropical astrology and sidereal astrology? The very short answer is sidereal astrology uses sidereal time, astronomical time. What we do, any sidereal astrologer out there, regardless of the associations they're using, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the actual placement of the planets against the constellations. What a tropical astrologer does is they use the vernal point as the start of 0 degrees of Aries. The problem with that is that the vernal point, the spring equinox, has not been at 0 degrees of Aries in quite some time. Because of the precession of the equinoxes, the Earth, it wobbles very, very slowly over some 26,000 years. It changes what constellation is on the horizon at the time of the spring equinox. So for some reason, I don't know why. I can't fathom why anyone would want to use that. But a lot of astrologers still use 0 degrees of Aries of the start of the vernal point. I can tell you, I'll show you right now where the vernal point is as of this year. And to do that, we will go ahead and jump over to some astronomy software. Stand by. As you can see here, we have the Giza pyramids and a nice picture to go along with it. This is going to reflect sunrise at the time of the spring equinox. So this would be our vernal point, what tropical astrologers should be looking at and should be using. Now, this is for the 20th. I'm going to show you the 20th and the 21st, namely because the moment of the equinox at this latitude and longitude at this time of day is actually going to be in the middle of the night. So we're going to just show you both. Regardless, it's pretty much the same. But if we look at, and by the way, this program is called Stellarium. It's open source. You can download it right now for free and see everything that I'm telling you. Let's see here. The sun is rising on the equinox. It's coming up. Now, what constellation do you think is behind this horizon right here? According to tropical astrology, this should be the constellation of Aries. Let's see how close we are. Let's go ahead and get rid of the atmosphere. We will get rid of the landscape. And we got a nice alignment here. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Let's go ahead and pull some of these constellations out right here. Oh, look at that. What is that? Oh, looks like Pisces to me. Now I'm going to go ahead just to drive this point home a little bit more. We're going to go back some number of years. Let's just jump back, going back through time. As you can see, now into the 1990s. And we're moving farther and farther back in time. And again, this is happening because of the precession of the equinoxes. The Earth is wobbling very, very slowly on its axis. And as we go farther and farther back, we move into the age of Pisces. As you can see, just so you guys know, we're still like hundreds of years away from the age of Aquarius, but that's another conversation. And this again, happening because of precession of the equinoxes. Any astrologers using the tropical zodiac at this time in the last 2,000 years, it's going to be off by quite a lot. We're now into the 1600s. And again, we're looking at March 21st at the Giza Plateau. All right, so our tropical astrologers are still using this time right here, and they're still telling you everybody born on March 21st during any of these time periods, we're now into the 1300s, they're still telling you that your sun was in Aries when you were born. I don't know why. I don't know why. You have to reach out and ask them individually. If you are a tropical astrologer and you've been doing it this way, I would love to hear, because I don't know. So I would love to hear what you all have to say and what the justification for this is. So any sidereal astrologers, we're going to look at any of these time periods. We're going to look at the actual placement, the astronomical placement of each planet or moon or whatever, the mathematical point against the fixed constellations, the fixed stars. Now, obviously, sidereal astrologers, we have different techniques that vary also. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, because even so, some of what I do is very different than what a lot of astrologers do. Namely, because I'm not using the Greek element modality system or planetary rulership system. And I'm going to talk about that here shortly. I just still want to go back. As you can see, we're now into the year 850, and we're still in Pisces, still happening. This is, again, the moment of the spring. Can you tell I was gifted with a lot of sarcasm? So I apologize if that's offensive to a lot of people. I know some people think that if you are a spiritual person, you are somehow supposed to be devoid of humor, but I'm not anyone's guru, and I don't have to pretend like I don't have a deep, deep well of sarcasm just brimming to the forefront here. I'm sarcastically checking my non-existent watch down here, still in the sign of Pisces. Many people have commented how the age of Pisces does happen to coincide with the age of Christianity, and why a lot of Christians use the symbol of the fish. Now, some people say that was because a lot of his disciples were fishermen, obviously around the areas of Greece and the Mediterranean, that whole area where Christianity really took off. We had a lot of fishing. I don't know for sure. I'm just being honest with you. I don't know if it was because of the age of Pisces. A lot of early Christians, I'm about to go down the rabbit hole here. A lot of early Christians and Christianity, even into Judaism, a lot of astrologers in these groups and cultures. So it is possible that that's what's going on, but I don't know for sure. As you can see, we're at year 0, still in the age of Pisces. Let's keep going. Let's do this. Let's go all the way back, because I have time. I'm gonna drink some more coffee. Let's see if I can multitask while I'm doing this. Been a long time since the vernal point was at 0 degrees of Aries. So still moving along here. Okay, we are now at 500 BC or BCE. My academic people get angry. Say BC. We'll get angry about silly things. We're still technically in the constellation of Pisces, but let's just say we're at 0 degrees of Aries, although literally we're in the constellation of Pisces, as you can see, even 500 years ago. Something very interesting happened around this time period. This was when the Greek astronomers, astrologers, philosophers, alchemists, this is when they really started to solidify their adoption of Babylonian or Persian astrology and even some Egyptian astrology into their own system. Somewhere in here, it was decided that the sun is rising at, well, still looks like Pisces to me, but at 0 degrees Aries, this is the vernal point. So that's just the way it's always going to be. In some academic circles, it's thought that the Greeks discovered the precession of the equinoxes, even though it's very clear that many ancient cultures knew about precession. All the same, even if the Greeks had discovered it, they should have still understood that the vernal point is going to change It's not going to be stuck at this one spot. When the Greeks started using Babylonian astrology and they started developing their own astrology, they were relatively close to what was actually going on in the sky at the time, even though subsequent generations of astrologers, every 72 years, they were off by another degree. So now we have a full at least 23-degree difference between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac, which again is just astronomical time. I know a lot of my practitioners of Jyotish are going to get very angry with me, and I'm very sorry, but it has to be said. This astrology over here, adopted by the Greeks, which was still sort of using the correct placements over here, this was transmitted likely via trade routes eastward into India. And if you look at the zodiac and much of the meanings of the constellations and planets that are used in Jyotish or Vedic astrology, much of this comes from Greece, including what I'm about to tell you about, the element-modality system and planetary rulership system. However, something fortunate and miraculous happened during this transmission is that Vedic astrology, and I'm going to call it Vedic astrology. You guys can get upset if you want, but that's what most people in the West understand it is. When I talk about Vedic astrology, they're going to know what that is. So I'm going to use that term, but Vedic astrology continued to use sidereal time, which was, let's go outside, let's look at the placement of these planets and points and use that for the basis of our calculations. This personally affected me because this was my wake-up call. Oh, I should probably tell that story. If you don't know, about 23 years ago, I started working as a professional astrologer. Among other things, I did psychic readings, paranormal investigations, psychic development, blah, blah, blah. But I was using classical astrology, classical associations, the tropical zodiac, and I was noticing maybe like half of the people I was talking to and giving them these descriptions and meanings and associations, they were like, well, it kind of fits, it kind of doesn't. When I moved over to the sidereal zodiac, or the actual astronomical time, yes, I'm just beating the dead horse for you if you can't tell. The accuracy of my readings skyrocketed. I could not believe it. I never went back. It became very clear to me that something was off here with the tropical zodiac. However, there's still a lot of inaccuracy in my descriptions. So what I decided to do was start looking into the original meanings of the constellations and the planets and everything. And that's how I started learning about Babylonian astrology, Egyptian astrology, although I don't think their system was nearly as advanced as what was cultivated and created in Mesopotamia. However, I do believe that there's probably a source mythology for a lot of these original meanings, and probably a lot of these different cultures knew about each other. Again, another conversation, won't go into that too much. Right now, I do want to tell you a little bit about where things kind of went haywire and why my readings are so different from what other Western sidereal astrologers use, as well as Vedic astrologers. First, I'm going to tell you about the Greek planetary rulership system. Again, if I haven't already made this clear, what happened was the Greeks did not have their own system of astrology as far as we know it. The astrology that you are familiar with and everyone is familiar with comes from the ancient Near East. We're looking at Babylon, Sumer, some of the oldest writing humanity has in existence comes from this time period, and it talks about the constellations, the planets. It's astronomical in nature or astrological in nature. They were absolutely trying to predict the future, not so much of the individual, although despite what some people would tell you, there was evidence that they were doing exactly that. But again, another conversation. The Greeks, to their credit, were very interested in metaphysics and trying to understand the universe, and they came up with these systems that they believed were going to enhance accuracy of their own. One of these was the planetary rulership system. I'm going to show this to you, and I want you to understand the Greeks made this up. They just made it up. It did not exist before. In the process of creating these systems, They even disregarded their own mythology in relation to the constellations. So I just want you to bear that in mind as I show you some of these images. If you don't already know, it was the Babylonians who divided this up here, this circle, into 12 equal parts, 12 equal houses of 30 degrees. This is important because, well, you'll see. Yes, I do use it. However, I also use the actual placement in the constellations, even though they are not equally divided. There is a reason for that. I'm not going to get into that today. The current meanings of the houses that most people use, including Vedic astrologers, was developed in Greece. And you're going to see how this image right here and another one that I'm going to show you again was fabricated. There was a Greek philosopher and his name was Empedocles, and he lived around 1490 to 430 BCE, and he is credited with creating the theory of the 4 classical elements. I'm sure you are very familiar with them: earth, air, fire, and water. And later philosophers and alchemists, they expanded upon this, and they decided that earth was cold and dry, fire was dry and hot, air was hot and wet, and water was wet and cold. And I'm sure a lot of people out there say that, yes, that's true. Empedocles was also credited with identifying the processes that corresponded to these elements, either increasing or decreasing. And this idea was developed into the theory of the 3 modalities. That is their mode of operation, whether they are cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Cardinal was the forceful initiation of the element, fixed was the stabilized form, and mutable was the flexible version. Again, I know you're out there saying, yeah, but that's so true. Like, that definitely happens. We can see it in this sign or that sign. I'm going to get to that. Let me go ahead and show you this beautiful graphic that I made with my own mouse, probably with Microsoft Paint. As you can see, this is what happened. The Greeks took first the elements, the 4 elements, and they assigned them to these houses, and thus these constellations associated with these houses took on these traits. So Aries became fiery, Taurus earthy, Gemini airy, so on and so forth. Same thing they did with the modalities. Taurus became fixed, Gemini mutable, and so on and so forth. All of this completely discounted the original meanings of the constellations. This system right here is why, in my opinion, so many people think astrology is a joke. This system, invented again by Greek philosophers maybe 2,000-ish years ago and expanded upon by alchemists over medieval times. The original astrology, which was cultivated at least over 3,000 years prior to Greek influence, but very likely for tens of thousands of years prior to that. There is some evidence in that. Again, not going to go into that in this video. But as that happened, Greek and classical astrology continued to move farther and farther away from the original meanings. Even though the use of the sidereal zodiac remains in Vedic astrology, this system right here continues to exist, and many Vedic astrologers use these meanings. Again, these were created on the spot, and they have no relation to astrology. Now, I know what you're thinking, but I'm a Taurus and I'm stubborn and I love material things, and so I'm definitely this fixed earth. I guarantee you there are other reasons why you have those traits, and they're almost certainly have nothing to do with this. You have many planets and points in your chart with many different resonant energies throughout. The chances that you are going to have some of these traits is absolutely possible, if not probable. So yes, sometimes we see some of these. We all have a little bit of these traits in us somewhere along the lines, but that does not mean it's because these associations have anything to do with the constellation. And I'm going to give you some examples of this in just a minute. But before I do, I want to go back to the image that I just shared with you just a second ago. I have some actual dates and quotes and stuff for this image. I can't find it, so I'm just going to paraphrase over here. This image right here is the basis for the planetary rulership system. So in Babylonian astrology and ancient astrology, there were already not really planetary rulers in the traditional sense. I mean, there are divine associations with the planets, depending on what else is going on, what constellation they're in, and the whole thing. However, the Greeks decided they were going to make up their own planetary rulership system, and this is what they did. They took the two brightest luminaries in the sky, that was the sun and the moon, and they assigned them to the two constellations that rose during the summer solstice in their part of the world, which were somewhere here between Leo and Cancer. The problem with this is kind of obvious, is that in the southern hemisphere, this is wintertime. So right out of the gate, we have a flawed system because this would be the dark time of the year. Then what they did was they divided the ecliptic straight down the middle. And then they basically, hold on, let me actually bring up a different picture. You can see it a little bit better what I mean. They just took the planet and they equally divided them out over here. As you can see, Virgo and Gemini became associated with Mercury. Venus became the planetary ruler of Libra and Taurus. Mars, Scorpio and Aries. Jupiter, Sagittarius and Pisces. And then finally Saturn with Capricorn and Aquarius. In some cases, some of the traits of the planet, the original planet, does relate to the original meanings of the constellation, which is where we get some of that overlap from the accurate and the inaccurate. Some of it maybe was a coincidence. Nevertheless, somebody made this up. They discounted everything else that came before. And I'm going to give you a really brief rundown because I don't have time to go into all of it today. This is actually a massive, massive conversation. I'm going to pull this one up again so you can behold my marvelous Microsoft Paint skills. So I'm going to look at a few of these with less overlap so you can see what I'm getting, because sure, this one, originally the constellation of Aries was known as the hired man. Sometimes it was depicted as a sheep. In many cases, this time of year when the sun was rising, it was a very fertile time. Animals were having babies. And so sure, we can see some of that creative, fiery type of energy, and maybe powerful energy mixed up in this fire cardinal. This was originally a bull. And so, yes, we have a very earthy animal. We can definitely see how maybe there are some earth traits in here, if we want to call them that. Whether or not it's fixed, the original bull of heaven, Gugulana, was not stubborn in the least. As a matter of fact, he was a servant and very submissive. But still, there's a little bit of overlap. So, we'll scrap it for now. But what about Gemini being an air sign and being mutable? What about Cancer? That is supposedly a water sign, which maybe, there are some watery traits in there, but also it being cardinal. Let's take a look at these two. Let's jump back over. Did not intend to go through a whole lecture today, but that's where we are. This here, in case you didn't know, is the constellation of Gemini. It was originally known as the Great Twins. Down here, we have the Little Twins. We have very similar mythology and meaning behind both of these signs. And then right over here, we have the constellation of Cancer. This is a deeper academic conversation that we won't get into. Suffice to say, this likely was not a crab. It was almost certainly a turtle. When you pore over, and I do mean this literally, when you start to pore over the mythology of this entire portion of the sky, with these two constellations being dominant in their little areas, we'll say, because they're along the ecliptic, you start to notice reoccurring themes. For example, the Great Twins were originally these warriors, and they were dressed to the hilts in armor. Even in the transmission of this constellation and the meaning of the constellation to Greece, we still have them being, if not brothers in arms, actual brothers of Castor and Pollux. If we look at this constellation in India, we are looking at Yama, whose name meant twin. So we have this entire sibling bond, this deep familial love and bond occupying this space and just pouring out of this entire space over here. Now, are they being protective? Are they protecting some access to the underworld? Arguably, yes, because this was a time when these constellations over here started rising. This was a time in ancient Mesopotamia when it was the season of death and pestilence. And so there is some access to the underworld that's going on over here. But this had nothing to do with what most people associate with the sign of Gemini, with the element of air. This is deep emotion. This is not overthinking. This is instinct to protect and devote yourself to your loved ones, possibly to protect yourself. Nothing to do with air. As far as it being flexible, not really sure what about warriors getting ready to throw down has anything to do with being flexible or mutable. Not really anything. Now, if you're saying, well, my sun or my moon or my ascendant is in Gemini and I'm an overthinker and I, exhibit all of these very mutable air traits. Again, it probably has something to do with some of the other things going on in your chart that you are maybe not aware of because you're using the tropical zodiac, or you're just using incorrect descriptions, which through no fault of your own, there's no way nobody talks about this. You have no idea what I had to do just to figure out who came up with this system. Nobody talks about it. Nobody wants you to know that this was all just made up stuff. Somebody just made this up a couple thousand years ago. So then we go over to the crab. In all likelihood, this constellation, as I said, was a turtle. The most famous turtle we have in ancient Mesopotamia is Enki's turtle. And he is most famous for digging a giant hole and pulling Ninurta down in by the heel, likely the basis of the story of both Hercules, or part of the story of Hercules, and also the vulnerability demonstrated by Achilles. This is very much associated with digging way down deep and accessing the dark places of the mind, of possibly the body, of the soul, going into this deep, dark underworld, whether that is in a microcosmic or macrocosmic setting. Sure, there are some watery elements in here, but Cancer is an extremely internal, and I would argue very subjective and thus cognitive sign. People with strong Cancer in their chart, again, this is based on the actual placement of the planets against the constellation. Cancers are hyper analyzers. They're very internal. They're very subjective. They're always trying to understand their place in space and time. They're extremely thoughtful. They are extremely self-oriented, not in a selfish way, but in a way that one seeks to understand the self. These are just some of the best examples of, first of all, how the element modality system has honestly completely distorted the original meanings of these constellations, as well as the planetary rulership. Going back to this image, and I need a reminder too, because I don't use these and I haven't for many, many years, and I have blessedly forgotten so much of this. But as you can see here, Saturn was associated with Capricorn and Aquarius. First of all, in Saturn's defense, much of the negative associations came even after Greek astrology into medieval times. It got progressively darker and more negative over time, and there's really no reason for it. Yes, in some of the original texts, Saturn was referred to as the destroyer, but it was also considered a planet of the sun. And it was just like having the sun somewhere in the chart, in the sky. It's just a tiny little version of the sun just off there in the distance, and you could see it at nighttime. Not only that, but all of the planets had their negative and positive traits. So they were none of them were inherently good or bad. But the thing that I think is one of the biggest tragedies in all of classical astrology is this right here. So let's go over to, I did not know I was going to have this much energy to have this conversation with you today. I was pretty sure I was going to struggle to string sentences together. This right here is the constellation of Capricorn. As you just saw from the randomly assigned planetary rulership system, Saturn was associated with the goatfish. If you have the inclination to just do so much research and you want to filter all of this stuff out and start looking into the mythology, this is probably the most nurturing, mothering, and affectionate of all of the constellations. Even in Greek astrology, which is so weird that they stripped all of this out so that they could superimpose their own system onto it. This constellation in Greek mythology nursed Zeus, acted as a surrogate mother for him while he was evading death by father. This is just love and affection and attention in this unending wellspring of devotion that mostly mothers, but parents in general, pour into their offspring, and that we pour into the things that we love and we care about. Associating this with Saturn is a travesty. Then you consider that we take all of those negative, just very silly associations with Saturn that now exist, and we still, or some astrologers still associate this with Capricorn, is an abomination. I'm sure if you made it this far into the video and you are not a professional Western or tropical astrologer, then you have learned all kinds of new things about astrology, the origins of astrology, and I'm sure it has been a great day for you. If you are a tropical astrologer or a classical astrologer, and possibly even a practitioner of Jyotish, you are probably furious. Either way, please tell me what you think. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If you want to rant and rave and tell me what a moron I am and how all of my information is incorrect, please feel free to do so. I will respond to you professionally and compassionately, and I am happy to have an intellectual conversation with you about all of those things. Either way, I would love to hear what you have to say. If you thought this video was helpful and you're watching it on YouTube, please hit the like button. That helps me out. Also, I'm very passionate about this, if you couldn't tell. I love astrology. I've seen it change people's lives. It's changed my life. I don't know what I would do without it. When you can tune into the cosmic energies, everything just gets easier. And I want to share that with other people too. So please share this video if you know anybody who thinks it might be interesting, or just, I don't have any social media other than YouTube. So if you want to pop this on your socials, I would really appreciate that. I'm going to do my very, very best to put out a video every Monday or Sunday. Technically, I want to do it Sunday, but sometimes it might not get out until Monday. I'm 2 weeks in, so I'm on a roll. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that happens. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified when another video comes out like this. If you are interested in seeing what the ancients had to say about your natal chart, or even future prediction based on your ancient astrological natal chart, I have put a link to my new Etsy store in the video description, along with a promo code. So feel free to do that. I'll also try to remember to put my contact information in the video description. I am moving all of my astrology information off of my old website, and I am in the process of migrating everything so it's nice and organized properly, and I'm taking my time because I don't want to stress about it, but eventually I'll put that in the video description too. Yes, I did say that I was going to talk about the upcoming stuff for this week, the forecast, but I went a little overboard with this video, so we're gonna have to skip that. It doesn't matter, I hit it twice, and I'm going to hit it again next weekend because we're going to have the new moon forecast for the whole month. So be sure to like and subscribe, and the notifications and everything. And other than that, just take very good care of yourself, and I will see you next time.